Thanks, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. Always that first speaker coming back from the break, right? Everybody's still sort of buzzing from the conversations that you've had, so we'll try to keep it going here. My catchy, non-cliche title is Seeing the Forest for the Trees and Other Natural Climate Solutions. And actually, one of the best lead-ins was Mayor Duggan. I thought his talk was really spot on. With respect to what they're doing here in Detroit with these, greenways and things like that. But the reason that I chose this title, other than I thought it was catchy, is that I'll just speak for myself. I think that sometimes climate is messy. It's a bit confusing. We start talking about emissions and different climate models and things like that. And so sometimes it's hard to see a solution that's right in front of us. And so we need to take a step back and look at a distance to see a solution. And in this case, the solution I'm going to talk about today is literally the land that surrounds us each day here in Michigan. So I'm going to talk about this land and the role it can play in meeting our climate objectives, and if we take action in this space, how this landscape can improve the quality of life for everyone. I was told about the green button. So this is a sector of climate that I'm talking about. It's known as natural and working lands. And what are they, and how does action in this sector help us meet targets in My Healthy Climate? These lands are the largely undeveloped lands in the landscape around us, the forests, the grasslands, the waters, the farms of Michigan. Some of these lands are in public ownership, and some of them are in private. Some of them are wilderness areas, some are urban parks. They're used for agriculture, they're used for forestry, a lot of different uses. So how do they help? Well, without getting into some really complex modeling equations showing how CO2 and all these gases interact with their environment. Basically, they are naturally pulling carbon dioxide out of the air, other greenhouse gases, they're sequestering them, and they're storing them. And so they are really doing the job for us. The other thing is that this is the lowest emission sector that we have here in Michigan. It's less than 9%. But given the fact that these trees and these natural landscapes can actually pull and mitigate climate by pulling emissions out of the air and storing it, it really has the ability to offset some of these other sectors. This sector also intersects with some of the others. The building sector, we can be building out of wood instead of steel or concrete, and so there's an intersection there. There's also an intersection with the energy sector because we know to meet our renewable goals, we're going to use a lot of land, and so we need to be smart about that land. So there's an intersection there with transmission and the energy sector. So let's get right into it with Michigan forests. So when opportunity assessments are done for Michigan, forests represent the largest opportunity, the biggest opportunity for climate mitigation. And one of the reasons is because we have so much forest in the state. We have about 20 million acres, both public and private land in the state is forest. And if you have a hard time getting yourself around 20 million acres and what that looks like, it's about 50% of Michigan's land area, or about 15 million football fields. I'm not sure 15 million football fields is really helping anyone get their head around that, but I just throw that out there. And if you listen to Google, they'll tell you that each of these trees can absorb about 48 pounds of carbon dioxide each year. And so when you spread that out over 20 million acres, and the Forest Service estimates we have about 14 billion trees in this state, that's a lot of carbon that's being sequestered. And yet we know that we can do more. And one of the biggest areas is planting trees. And the Michigan DNR plants about 6 million trees a year, but we've also got an opportunity to scale that up. And we know that in northern Michigan, where we've got poor soils and some of this farmland that's gone fallow, being able to plant trees on those grounds and keep them as forests and keep them in working landscapes is going to be beneficial for the climate solutions. And we're working with our partners in MDARD on a RCPP grant to actually do just that and pilot that. We also have a huge opportunity in urban forestry. We know that urban, trees, especially in an urban environment, trees are not equitably distributed. So we've got places that don't have the trees that they need. There are these heat islands, and if we can plant more trees there, we can regreen our cities, we can improve neighborhoods, make them more beautiful, sort of like what the mayor was talking about, and there's a real opportunity there to cool our cities and make them more inviting. So that's another area. The other one is just climate smart forestry. So when we're managing forests, we're thinking about forest products, we're thinking about wildlife habitat, but we really need to think about the carbon and the way that is being managed. Recently, the University of Maine did a study, and they said just by changing a few silvicultural systems, you can really improve the way that carbon is stored in the forest without reducing any of the outputs of forest products or cutting. So that's a real opportunity. And then the other one I want to point out is mass timber, and we have a real opportunity there. And if you're not familiar with mass timber, talk to Sandra Lupian, the folks there at MSU. And if you're not familiar, it is taking lumber, it's gluing it together, it's nailing it together, and it's creating structural components for big buildings that is embodying carbon, it's promoting forest products. Let me just say forest products are a $22 billion industry, billion with a B, in the state of Michigan, so we definitely want to promote that and support that. But we can build these buildings with lower carbon than steel or concrete, and you can feel the stress leave you as you're going into these buildings because you're surrounded by wood and you just want to be there. So that's another, again, a great opportunity. Switching over to the agricultural sector, we have some real opportunities here in things like planting cover crops, using conservation tillage, using soil amendments like biochar, all of these things, reducing inputs of nitrogen through precision agriculture. All of these policy decisions can help us have healthier soils and promote the agricultural community. A lot of these are Farm Bill programs, so we need to get behind the Farm Bill and talk to our friends at MDARD over here about that. We need to fund programs like Buy Michigan Agriculture Campaign to encourage the purchase of Michigan-grown and raised products and address food insecurity challenges and counter supply chain issues. What about, oh, I didn't, gotta forward that. But a couple other things I want to touch on. One is if you look at that picture up there, it looks like a giant slug. That's actually a satellite photo of Lake Erie, and you can see a lot of blue-green algae that is blooming there because of nutrients. What if we could restore wetlands in the watershed, intercept those nutrients, allow the sediments to settle out? We would be creating wildlife habitat, we'd be reducing inputs into that system, and we would have public lands in places that we need public lands. DNR is working on that with the Eagle right now. Also about solar, I talked to my friend Dr. Sarah Mills. If we're going to meet the solar demands of the next century and the renewable energy goals, we're going to need between 100 and 200 square miles of Michigan. We don't want that to come from natural and working lands except as a last resort. We really want to look at brownfields, industrial sites. We want to put our solar there. We don't want to change rural communities if we don't have to. And we know that's contentious too, so DNR is working on that as well, looking at some of our poorer quality sites that we can site renewable energy on. So those are, again, important. Gotta remember to switch. So the other thing is this sector, we sort of talked about those climate outcomes. We can be reducing emissions, we can be sequestering carbon, but there's a lot of really attractive co-benefits with this. And those co-benefits are the non-climate things like clean air and clean water, those higher level outcomes like public lands and public recreation, job creation, economics. I mentioned a few of the economic things. So some of these higher level outcomes, when we manage our public lands and our other lands and improve them, we can achieve these co-benefits. And so when we're investing in natural working lands, you've got the climate benefits, but you're benefiting people directly. You're improving the quality of life by these parks. It's something about climate that's tangible. And so you can also multiply the already important climate benefits by doing these actions to have these higher level outcomes. So we've identified the need to take action on climate as identified in the My Healthy Climate Plan. We recognize the opportunity. We've seen the clear and unmistakable benefits to taking action on climate in the natural and working land sector, leveraging the very landscapes that are around us to improve the quality of life, create economic opportunities, provide for public health outcomes, wildlife habitat, public access, and cooler cities. Is there a platform that has the ability to chart a path forward in all of these? It's taking all of these things into account. A project that can act as a measuring stick by which we can take action in this sector, something we can all rally around that supports climate. Well, there is. It's called America the Beautiful, and this is a national effort to conserve 30% of land and water by the year 2030 to naturally capture those greenhouse gas emissions while maintaining and improving recreational opportunities for all Michiganders, expanding access in disproportionately impacted communities, and protecting biodiversity. It's going to happen through collective and inclusive action, and each state is charged with developing their own strategy to connect and restore these lands. So this ambitious goal has to be a state-by-state approach because every state looks different. What we do here in Michigan is going to look very different from what they do in Indiana, and that's okay. So really, this has to be less about America the Beautiful, less about 30 by 30, and more about Michigan the Beautiful. So that's what I want to talk about for the rest of the time today. So let's look at a map of Michigan. We'll get a little nerdy here. Look at this map. You can see all of this sort of colored confetti on there. These lands that are protected in some way. They're conserved, they're in federal ownership, state ownership, they may have conservation easements on them, they may be local parks. But it's more than just that, because we don't want to just do some accounting exercise and check a box and say, yeah, we're at 30%, we're good. What we want to do is we can look at this land through different lenses. We can look at this land and say, you know, there's a lot of land in the north that's conserved. There's not as much in the south. And we've got plans to address that through the public land strategy that DNR oversees. So we can look at the geographic distribution of these lands. We can look at the ecological distribution. We're probably really heavy to northern forests. We're really light to southern prairies. So let's look at that. We can look at equity of access. You know, again, more in the north, less in the south. How do we improve our green spaces in urban communities? We can look at this through a biodiversity lens. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, all the while we're promoting, you know, basically land conservation that benefits climate and benefits all of us. You know, can these lands be connected? And that's why I say conservation is about the journey. It's not the destination. It's how we really look at these lands and manage them for the future. And as these conservation efforts go forward, there's going to be naysayers, and we've seen that in other states where folks say, well, this is some kind of land grab or something like that, and it's not that. It's measuring what's already conserved, and it's looking at other ways to promote voluntary practices on private lands through things like the Farm Bill that are going to make them better and more productive, so that's not going to be anything negative from that standpoint. And then also from a tribal standpoint, we've already made a commitment to do early tribal consultation. We in no way want to infringe on any treaty rights or treaty resources or any cultural resources that the tribes are managing. And so it's all about just trying to figure out how all these pieces fit together. So the goal is to conserve 30% of Michigan by the year 2030 in using the natural and working lands to help achieve these climate goals and objectives. So what are the pathways to, as we heard before, seeking a pleasant peninsula? It's figuring out what counts. And so this will include some public lands, but it also is going to include some voluntary actions on private lands. we have to figure out what tools do we have. Not only the land conveyance tools and protection instruments like conservation easements, but the geographic information systems and viewers that allow us to see and manipulate this data so we can manage this. And then who participates? I already mentioned this has to be a uniquely Michigan project that takes into account the lands and waters of Michigan, the lands owned by the state, the local economic conditions, and the people. It's going to take all of our people, not just some of the people, all of our people to make this work. So what are the next steps? Michigan DNR is going to be hosting a 30 by 30 summit later this year to kick off this initiative, organize partners, and engage stakeholders. Be watching for information from our DNR Office of Public Lands for more information on this. And I hope everybody can play a role. And in closing, I started this talk by saying that these are the lands that we see around us every day. The farm, the park, the forest. In this sector, these natural working lands contribute to the quality of life of all of us that live in Michigan. Unlike any other sector, these are really special places. I also mentioned that climate is a bit nebulous. When you're talking about emissions or you're talking about climate models, it can be a little bit nerdy. I'll own that. Carbon credits, right? Say no more. I'm part of that. But when you start talking about our green spaces and the places that people love, when you talk about farms, when you talk about investing in the green infrastructure in the very land that not only sustains us but surrounds us, now you've got climate that has a face and it has a place. And it's the farmer, and it is the forest, and it's the park. And those are the things where people can see that. Those are no longer nebulous concepts. Those are tangible, and they're concrete, and they're places that people love, and the places that they want to protect. So I'll leave you with this, that this is going to take some bold action. It's going to take some strong leadership. But I can't think of a better place to take action in a better sector with more meaningful results for all of us. So thanks for your time here today.